because, obviously, subjects appear to be blind for this repetition of this word in this sentence. And again, they're looking right at these words. Okay, they're not being presented off on the periphery, and they're actually expecting these words to come up because they're being asked to indicate when they see them. Yeah? You can get it when it's just words, not in a sentence. Again, Canwisher did this again because when we read a sentence, we tend to kind of read over lots of things. You probably noticed when you prepare a paper. Okay, when you type it out, you miss a lot of proofreading errors and things like that because you kind of know what the sentence is. You kind of fill in the gaps, and this particular version of the phenomenon depends a lot on that. Okay, but you can get it even when the words don't create a sentence. I'll show you a kind of sort of related example of that in a second. Okay, so what happens now is that you can get these priming effects, okay, in repetition blindness. Okay, so here, first, you've got a condition in which the word is repeated, okay. It was work time, so work had to get done. And there's a control condition in which you get the same kind of phrase. It was study time, so work had to get done. Okay, so there's no repetition there. And what you can see is this is response latency in a lexical decision task. The word work will come up, or study, or whatever. And you get a nice priming effect when the word is repeated, regardless of whether subjects see it or not. So again, you're getting priming in repetition blindness, despite the fact that subjects don't see it. Okay, now, I can hear the gears turning. You've repeated the word work twice. Okay? How do you know that the priming doesn't come from the first appearance of the word work as opposed to the second appearance of the word work? Well, again, there's a trick in these experiments, which is that you get repetition blindness for physically similar words as well. So you can imagine a sentence that says, it was work time, so words had to be done. Okay? And we're looking for priming from the unseen word, words. That's how you do it. And you get the priming effect, which suggests that even though the subjects were blind to this repeated word, okay, or a very similar word, you're still getting some kind of priming. Now, this lexical decision priming, that's repetition priming. It's priming that's based on similarity in physical appearance between a word like work and a word like word. Can you get semantic priming as well? Nobody's done that. Okay, we just don't know whether we can get that or not. Hint, hint. That's another senior thesis for someone. Here is another experiment, another paradigm. This is known as the attentional blink. It's also something that you see in this RSVP procedure, rapid serial visual the presentation. And here, subjects are presented with a set of letters, and all they have to do is to indicate whether whether particular target letters come up or not. In this case, the subject has been asked to indicate whether the letter F appears in the stream, or whether the letter R appears in the stream. So that's all he has to do is say yes if F or R appears in the stream. And what happens here is that subjects are very good at detecting the first letter, okay, in the target set. But if the second letter appears very close to the first letter, they're blind to it. They don't see it. They don't notice it, even though they're looking for it, and even though it's appearing right in the area of the screen where they're looking for the object. It's as if the attentional process, once it finds the thing that works, once it finds one of the things it's looking for, blinks for a second, so it doesn't notice the next thing that's coming up. This is known as the attentional blink, okay? And it occurs only if there is a relatively short interval between the presentation of the first target and the presentation of the second target. If the presentation of the second target is delayed by even another letter or two, you don't get this phenomenon. So somehow it's almost like a refractory period in neuron firing or something like that. When once attention's captured something, it can't capture something else for a second. But the question is, can you get priming from this unseen item? And yes, you can get this phenomenon of attentional blink with words as well as with letters. This is just the first experiment. They used letters. And here, what you can see here is that there is a nice priming effect in the attentional blink. Again, percent correct identification of these things. If they identified the first probe correctly, this is correct identification of the lexical priming. And what you can see here is when the two match, you get this nice priming effect, an increase in correct identifications. So again, even though the items are not seen consciously by the subjects, we're getting priming effects, and these priming effects are both of the repetition variety that can be mediated by a perceptual representation and of the semantic variety that has to be mediated by some kind of meaning representation. So here are some other examples of this. This is an actual semantic priming experiment. And again, what you're looking at here is correct identification. That looks like a small effect, but it's there, okay? They see the first probe, you get this nice priming effect. If they don't see the first probe, then there's no attentional blink, right? So only if they see the first probe, you get this nice priming effect. And there's another one. Okay. Now, there's another one of these phenomena, something that Revan-Suo has talked about, talks about a little bit, known as change blindness. And again, this occurs in rapid serial visual presentation. And what change blindness refers to is the fact that if you present two very similar pictures in rapid succession, closely spaced together in time, subjects will tend not to notice that the pictures have changed. So here we have a Zen garden in Japan, and what you present the first picture, and then you present the second picture relatively quickly thereafter, and subjects don't know that there is one of the rocks has been deleted. This is known as change blindness, and it's another phenomenon that Revan-Suo talks about. You ought to be able to look for priming effects in change blindness as well. So, for example, people don't notice the change between the two of them, which suggests that they either don't notice this rock at all, or they don't notice that it's missing. One way or the other, you ought to be able to see priming effects coming from this unnoticed feature of the stimulus. Nobody's looked, to my knowledge, nobody's looked at that yet, but it's a fairly obvious prediction from the study. Okay, so now we're back on track. We'll talk a little bit about the scope of implicit perception here, because I want to make a couple more points. But these are phenomena where what the investigators have focused on is that people don't see things because they're not attending to them, or people don't see things even though they are attending to them, both of which are quite interesting. But in this segment of the course, we pretty much accept that there is some kind of close relationship between attention and conscious perception. The question we're asking is, what happens outside of conscious perception? What happens in pre-attentive processing? And what we've seen time and time and time again is that you can get these priming effects that show that objects that are not consciously perceived can nonetheless influence the person's experience, thought, or action. We've seen that from the Person-Jastrow study of subliminal perception. Marcel's study of masked semantic priming, these other kinds of phenomena that I've talked about today. But the question is, how much processing can you get out of a masked stimulus or a subliminal stimulus or an unattended stimulus? This is the question of the scope of so-called subliminal perception. Many of you are too young to remember this, I'm afraid, but in the presidential election of 2000, the Republican, the presidential campaign, produced on television a fairly notorious video that had pictures of people like Al Gore, who was the candidate at the time, and other kinds of White House staff, and there were these words that came across the screen, and in one frame looked like that, okay, rats, okay, which was in fact part of the word Democrats, but it was focused right on the middle of the screen, and then we say, don't let the bureaucrats, do bad things, or don't let the Democrats do bad things. This was an ad that was criticized on the grounds that subliminal perception was really powerful, okay? And there was this subliminal association now between Democrats and rats not being good things that was biasing people's the perception of the Democratic campaign. This comes up in more prosaic, this question comes up in more prosaic domains as well. There are from time to time questions about the power of subliminal advertising. Back in the 1950s, there were some experiments done by marketing firms in which there would be a subliminal presentation of a little message like, drink Coca-Cola, okay? And that was supposed to enhance sales of soft drinks in the concession stand. More recently, we've seen the marketing of what are known as subliminal self-help tapes, which supposedly contain messages like, you won't feel the desire to smoke, you'll feel a desire to lose weight, you be nicer to your children, or whatever it is that you want help with. And the idea behind these subliminal self-help tapes is that the messages are embedded in some kind of noise, the sound of ocean water or white noise or something like that, so that you don't notice them. And the claim is that a subliminal stimulus will slip through your defenses somehow and create major behavioral change. You can still buy these things. I saw them at a drugstore just the other day for smoking cessation. Just as a little footnote, Phil Miracle and his colleagues in Canada bought some of these tapes off the shelf at a local drugstore and took them to the Canadian Submarine Command, where they have all sorts of interesting devices for extracting very weak audio signals from various tapes used in the detection of foreign submarines. And in this particular selection of tapes, they found absolutely no message on them at all. Okay? It was just a tape of white noise that you were buying at the drugstore. In another experiment, Tony Greenwald, now at the University of Washington, bought a bunch of self-help tapes for stopping smoking and another group of self-help tapes for weight loss, switched the labels on the tapes, and then gave them to people and found that